Hi Ben Carpenter here. I'm going to talk to you about the problems of clean eating, or the stereotypical view of what clean eating is. I'm also going to talk about the pros of clean eating. So if you want to hear both sides of the discussion, make sure you watch to the end of the video. So, oversimplified definition of both. Clean eating or rigid dieting tend to not count calories, but have a prohibited and a permitted food list. So they will only eat healthy or clean foods. Anything that's not healthy will not fit into part of their regular diet plan. On the other end of the spectrum, we have flexible dieting, or if it fits your macros, otherwise known as IIFYM. Nothing is strictly prohibited as such, as long as it fits within the macronutrient and caloric allowance set by their dietary target. Now, it's important to stress that it is not an either-or situation. For example, you will find people who eat clean, don't count calories, but still have dirty food, if you will. You'll also find people that count calories who only eat clean food. So it isn't necessarily an either-or situation, it is more of a spectrum. But I'm going to talk about both as extremes to make this kind of easier to digest. So, clean eating. To me, there are four main issues with clean eating, or four that I'm going to discuss with you. Issue number one is the idea that food quality is more important than food quantity. For example, if your basal metabolic rate is 2,500 calories, if you only ate organic chicken, organic eggs, organic vegetables, organic nuts, etc., but you ate 3,500 calories, you would still gain weight. Organic food or clean food, or whatever your definition is, does not defy caloric laws. So if you only ate organic food, natural food, no processing, but you ate 3,000 or 3,500 calories, or you had someone who ate bits of chocolate, cakes, whatever within their diet, but they ate 2,000 calories, this person would lose weight, this person would gain weight, assuming the same basal metabolic rate. So in that respect, food quantity in terms of calories is always going to be more important than food quality itself. So that's number one. Number two is the issue with the definition of clean eating. If I got 10 people in this room and asked them all for a list of clean foods, I guarantee you that there will be some discrepancies between each. Some foods seem quite obvious, for example chicken, but then you would find a vegan who said that eating meat is unhealthy. Then even within the kind of carnivores among us, you'll find some people will disagree with certain foods. For example, controversial foods tend to be things like bread, potatoes, butter, coffee. Some people tend to view them as fine, some people tend to view them as not. So keep in mind that your definition of clean eating may well differ from the person who's sitting next to you and their definition of clean eating. So issue number three. Some people tend to view food processing as bad. For example, a very well-known strength coach has said that his definition of clean food is something that undergoes minimal processing. Now, I like to play devil's advocate. Now, as an example, green tea is widely accepted as a healthy food, high in antioxidants, etc. But there is no green tea bag tree. Green tea has to undergo processing to go into a tea bag, to go into a box, to travel and end up in your kitchen. But that doesn't mean that green tea bags are unhealthy. Even something as obvious as chicken. Now, chicken didn't start as skinless and featherless and in modified atmosphere packaging. So even chicken has had to undergo a degree of food processing. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's unhealthy, obviously. So even if you are only eating organic food, chances are a degree of food processing has had to go in there somewhere. if you're buying from supermarkets, etc., etc., even if you're buying from butchers, meat will have had to have been processed in some way to end up in that form the way you see it. So the idea that food processing itself is bad is misguided. There are potentially healthy benefits towards food processing in terms of additional fibre in people's diets, in terms of additional vitamins, fortified foods, etc., etc. Things like baby foods or specialist medical foods have healthy benefits despite being processed towards that function. So don't believe that all food processing is bad. That is misguided. Number 4, people that follow clean eating approaches tend to be at a higher risk of food binges. This is supported with numerous studies in research, one of which involved elimination of bread from someone's diet. I have a video on this I'll link you to. And the group that omitted bread completely found themselves at a higher risk of dietary transgressions despite not achieving any greater weight loss. Then there's research on rigid versus flexible dieting, where rigid dieters found a higher degree of anxiety towards food. So typically clean eaters have a very strict permitted or prohibited list, but what tends to happen is after a few days, say once a week, people will have a cheat or a binge meal. Now, when I had this discussion with a personal trainer, they said the idea of if it fits your macros was ludicrous. Now, a common example for me to point that out is them as a trainer, they would advocate people having cheat meals for a psychological break. Now, if as a cheat meal someone was eating, let's say 7 slices of pizza once per week and exceeding their caloric requirements, is that really better than someone who eats 1 slice of pizza every day, has lower level of anxiety towards food, and also factors it into their caloric allowance? So this person's constantly hitting their calorie target, they're constantly eating in a deficit, their weight loss goals are on track. Whereas this person eats in a caloric deficit 6 days out of 7, and then has a crazy food binge where they massive hypercaloric intake. Can they really say that having a cheat meal every few days is better than someone who's eating it within their caloric allowance? I can't understand how anyone can think this is better. So to me, those are the 4 main issues of clean eating. However, I like to play devil's advocate. To me, and probably any good trainers out there, they will realise that different clients respond to different methodologies, even if it's something as simple as psychological preference. So you will find people who don't want to count calories. I know a personal trainer who followed quite a good strength coach's protocol. They said they had 2 or 3 weeks of good body composition changes from following their dietary approach, but they said that the 2 or 3 weeks of weighing food and counting calories meticulously, they found it impossible to stick with, and actually found it harder to do than what they're doing previously. So although they got good body composition results in the first 3 weeks, they actually said that in terms of stress towards food, it didn't work for them. So they went back to what they were doing. So the issue for me is that, as with a lot of things in the fitness industry, people make it out to be too black and white. No one seems to enjoy this grey bit in the middle of the spectrum. So you are going to have people who are trying to make conscious, beneficial changes to their diet by eating clean food. And I have seen people on the internet genuinely go as far as giving them an onslaught of abuse. I have read things where people have said clean eating is retarded. Pardon the terminology, but that is genuinely what they used. As well as, clean eating is bro science. And whilst I understand what they mean, clean eating will never trump something that's caloric controlled if their caloric requirements are out of balance. For some people, they will follow a calorie controlled diet simply because they are eating clean. So if you take someone who's obese, they make a conscious effort to eat clean foods, even without weighing their food, even without tracking calories, macros, etc. They will probably, by default, go on a caloric restricted diet and make positive changes to their health profile as well as body composition. Now, to me, the idea of insulting that person because they're not weighing food and tracking calories and fitting this person's ideology is insane. If they're making a beneficial change in terms of health and body composition, we should support that, even if it doesn't fit my ideology or your ideology. Fitness should be a beneficial thing. We should be able to support someone, even if it's not necessarily what I would pick, which it isn't. But if they can stick with it, if they can adhere to it, if they find it stress-free, if they can do this without worrying and achieve their goals, how can that ever be a bad thing? That's my view. So I think in a lot of cases, people are looking for one holy grail diet. Realistically, you need to know as much about every single diet as possible and use them as a certain tool for a certain individual. So although you might not value clean eating itself, and while it is highly flawed, as I've pointed out, you will find someone who gets on well with clean eating and achieves their goal, even if it isn't necessarily what you would have picked up front. So keep it in mind, every diet is a tool. Put it in your toolbox and use it when you need it. It might be never. You might find someone that it works perfectly for. So don't discount a diet just because it doesn't suit your ideology. That to me is crazy. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Please feel free to ask questions, post comments, etc, etc. My Facebook page is facebook.com/Ben Carpenter Personal Training, and my Twitter page is BDC Carpenter. And thank you for watching. Bye.